One of the most beautiful sounds on earth is the sound of a child's laughter, an unfiltered expression of happiness. And my 23-year-old soul cannot help but feel a glimmer of light in a dark world where it feels rare to see something, or rather someone, be so unapologetically happy. Happiness is a universal concept, often ingrained into our psyche as our purpose in life. If I do this, I'll be happy. If I do that, then I'll be happy. Maybe when I get this, I'll be happy, and so on. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a well-known statement taken straight from the American Declaration of Independence. It outlines unalienable rights within the United States to protect life, liberty, and the way of which people choose to live their lives happily. This idea, not unique to the Americans, of course, although they like to believe so, replicated itself across democracies that also believe this to be an unquestionable right to life as well. And there are many peoples and civilizations before them who thought the same thing too. But what does happiness even mean? There are thousands of ways, colloquially and in scientific literature as well, to define this vague term that even a 4-year-old has a grasp on. But when we say pursuit of happiness, could we possibly be more vague? What makes an activity or a pursuit lead to happiness? Is happiness a destination? Is it what abstractly gives life meaning? Or is it simply the fact that when you whimsically desire something, the freedom to chase such desires are a manifestation of happiness? Countless philosophers, thinkers, leaders, and public figures took turns in attempting to define happiness by capturing it in a profound quote that would help people understand its nature. But what if we meant we want to be happy? I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way. I want to be happy, straight up. Real ones know what I just referenced was Puss in Boots in The Last Wish. If you haven't watched that movie, you gotta watch it. It is amazing. Anyway, it might seem obvious that for us to know how to live happy lives, we should, at the very least, understand what it is we're trying to achieve. This episode will attempt to give you a clearer picture of what happiness could be, but what it most definitely is not. By holistically exploring happiness, scientific and proven methods of happiness, what we understand happiness to be, and how you can transform yourself to be a happier individual. And by the end of it, if you're happy with the episode and what it has to offer, if you want it to make us happy as part of the Glass Prism podcast, share it and add us to your podcast wherever you listen to them, and to not ever miss an episode. This is the Glass Prism podcast. Enjoy. There are many general misconceptions about happiness that make it hard for someone to be happy and stay happy in modern life. We will talk about some of the most important ones, allow you to identify them in your life, and hopefully by the end of the episode, you're better equipped to understand your wants and needs enough to find happiness. First, let us define happiness. For our purposes, we will keep it open-ended because, as the English language will attest to, there are many different ways to say, I am happy, with their own interesting nuances. Words like joy, euphoria, felicity, jubilee, bliss, all of which have subtle differences, but more or less mean the same thing. I want you to familiarize yourself with one word in particular used by Greek philosophers. This term, although the most complicated to pronounce, just like our previous terms, means happiness, but a particular type that many of these Greek philosophers believe to be more sustainable. Eudaimonia. It means happiness and well-being, but according to Aristotle, it is the happiness as a result of an active life governed by reason and action. But what are you trying to say? If you want to be happy, what does reason or action have to do with it? Well, this means the source of happiness, according to them, is more important than the outcome of happiness. A simple example is by eating cheesecake. It'll make you happy. But if you make eating cheesecake your life's goal, admittedly, it sounds enticing, I know, you might ultimately find despair in your health and fitness and clog up your arteries with the consistency of licorice. And you won't feel good no more. Amphetamine drives up your dopamine levels more than anything else you can possibly get your hands on. Will it make you happy? Yeah, it will, momentarily. Will it bring your life to crap right after? Most definitely. This is why we need to understand the first misconception, which is happiness is not about obtaining all that you desire. There once was a fisherman who lived a relatively content life. He woke up every morning, early in the day, or rather at every end of night, right before the first thread of dawn. Every day he rowed his boat out to the lake to fish for his daily catch and sell in the markets before noon, fresh and tasty. Before the hour clock strikes noon, his bountiful catch would be entirely sold, his pockets rewarded for his efforts, and so he walked back to his family with ingredients for dinner. Occasionally purchases a gift for his wife, a toy for the children, and sometimes even a robe for himself to enjoy. With the rest, he would save any additional gold coins and dedicate a portion for investments, and spend every afternoon until bedtime with his beautiful family. And every day he reflected on his blessings, a full stomach, his health, and the health of his loved ones, and the spare time he has after a strenuous day's work. One night, as this fisherman was out with a few friends, one of them asked him, "You are the best fisherman I know. I still don't understand. Why you don't hire a few helpers and fish for more? You're always out of the markets by noon, but just imagine the riches you will collect if you started a successful enterprise with your skills." The fisherman smirks to his friend and retorts with a simple statement. And after that, his friend replies, "You will live like a king, afford anything your heart desires." The fisherman repeats himself with the same calmness of the first time he replied to his friend. And then, another friend jumps in and says, "Well, after that you would spend all the time you want with your kids, your wife, and friends and live a carefree life, just like a king." The fisherman started to laugh while everyone gawked at him, waiting to see what was so funny. Finally, he replies, "You are asking me to work for more of what I already have. The end goal is exactly the life I am leading." To fully appreciate the story of the fisherman, if you had all the money in the world for a day, what would you get that would guarantee your happiness forever? Just imagine all the possibilities. A yacht for your Greek island, a private jet for spring break, a Porsche GT3 RS naturally aspirated 4.0 liter flat 6 engine with 520 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque. That would be my pick. But maybe you want a mansion. No, a castle. Okay, Rapunzel. But actually, what would you get to make sure you are forever happy? When the day ends and you have everything you ever wanted, what happens when you want something else? Or rather, that when you do have everything, you feel empty. Like the only way forward from the top of the mountain is down. What happens when you realize a mansion needs cleaning, a supercar needs an expensive oil change? You might go, well, with all the money in the world, maybe instead I can solve world hunger or donate enough to cure cancer. Very noble of you. But wars cause famines, so your efforts are wasted with trying to end them, because now you have to stop people from fighting first. And as finding a cure to cancer will reveal, you cannot just throw money at problems and hope they get fixed. Even if you had money to keep things going, is that what you want? Yes, so much money you don't know what to do with makes life easier, but doesn't make it satisfying. Here lies the wisdom of the story of the fisherman, in knowing what leads to happiness. Although some of you might not share the same vision of happiness as the fisherman, this story's wisdom still holds. Do not chase after things only to achieve more of what you have to make you happy. Spend that valuable time being happy with what you have. And science seems to agree with this idea. In fact, your level of satisfaction of attaining something you want is directly associated with the level of struggle committed to achieve it. In bro science speech, basically, things aren't enjoyable unless you hustled for them. But the second element that science tells us is that the most satisfying and sustainable sources of happiness is not high income, not high status, but rather a healthy lifestyle and a social circle that loves and supports you. Your quality of life goes up by 0 when you earn more than $75,000. I mean, thanks to inflation, that may be $100,000 to satisfy your basic needs, maybe $350,000 if you live downtown Toronto. But that means, why try to make more than a couple $100,000 if it won't make you happier? I mean, strictly from a I want to feel happy POV, eventually being used to a certain degree of luxury also reduces the level of enjoyment you get from experiences others might enjoy. Just by being rich, you've drastically decreased the pool of options and activities you enjoy by being the top 0.1%, because you do all of those activities anyway. I mean, a jet ski and a cottage in the French Alps sounds nice until you do it every holiday, as every snobbish child of a European oligarch will tell you. Yet, even those guys would rather cry about it in their expensive Mercedes. But if you aren't completely brainwashed by the glimmer and glamour of shiny, expensive stuff and rather be happy, then the fisherman gives us a good reason why you should follow his example. The fisherman understood the value of his daily hustle of fishing. He also understood that the things that will bring him the most joy are the things he currently possesses: family and friends. And in that, he was content. Why sacrifice the time you can enjoy with an eternal source of satisfaction for what is an expensive way to get fleeting thrills? I'm not saying abstain from riches like a Tibetan monk. Simply enjoy them the way they were supposed to. Occasionally, but also make sure you have friends and family for a permanent smile. That is what Aristotle would call eudaimonia, finding happiness with reason and work. Listen, I know to many of you out there, this is familiar. Nothing new, not a revelation, just much of the same. The question I ask myself whenever this is the case with me is, have I internalized this as if it were true? If I feel I'm missing a piece of the puzzle and no one's giving me the right pieces and then get frustrated, more often than not, I do have the right pieces. I'm just forcing certain pieces together rather than moving the pieces around to fit and create that satisfying bigger picture. Maybe the question you should be asking yourself is, why aren't my actions aligned with what I know is true? Why am I still chasing so many things that have nothing to do with my own happiness? Well, I can provide you with an interesting theory that you might have not considered related to the second misconception of happiness. Your desires aren't uniquely your own. When I was a child, I was smart enough to excel in science and math. I naturally thought, well, I'm gonna be a doctor. Many wanted to be doctors too. You know the joke. You can choose to be 4 things in an Arab household: a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a disappointment to the family. Yeah, my options weren't numerous, and I was intrigued by science naturally and didn't mind having the prestige and or the money that would come with a job like being a physician. So, for most of my youth, I thought, I'm gonna be a doctor. Then one day, I was hospitalized in my second year of university with an illness many specialists couldn't accurately diagnose. During my stay, I had many doctor visits, went through many tests, blood samples, funky imaging machines, tubes down the throat, everything. I remembered every single moment with profound detail. The aching pain, the broken AC in my room keeping it a smoldering 26 degrees, my bruised arm from all the blood samples, the cries of old people at night begging for medical attention. That was my experience as a patient. And yet the doctors tried their best to cater to all. Now I know that is more of a problem of how the Canadian healthcare system is understaffed and often mismanaged their workers, but even with factoring that in, I recognize something that I would have otherwise never realized until I became a doctor. I don't like the field of medicine. I don't ever want to be a doctor. Not because of my experience as a patient, but because I was practically shadowing the doctors who were assigned to me, and to be honest, after having professional and casual conversations with them, if I asked myself, would you want their lives? I would have answered no in a heartbeat. After being discharged, my recovery period was a couple months, and so I had a lot of time to reflect. And the first thing I thought of is, why the hell did I even want to be a doctor? The question is, how does anyone know what they want until they try it? Have you ever been a lawyer to want to be a lawyer? Or is it enough just to love law? I mean, practicing law and loving learning about it is two very different things. I'm sure you enjoy a few other things too, so why anyone is so convinced of their profession of choice is bewildering to me. For too many of us, mimetic desire is the culprit here. The desires that we mimic from the people and culture around us. Let's be honest here. If the culture rewards and provides status to a specific profession, there's no doubt a large percentage of people will want to be just that. Think TikTok dancers, YouTubers, influencers, or the worst lot, podcasters. The funny part is, those who are most particularly clueless would choose those professions as their default choice. It's the reason why Bali or Mykonos became such a popular destination after the Instagram hype it has generated. These types of desires are not necessarily a bad thing. A trip to Bali doesn't sound too bad to me either, but it could be bad if you have defined your happiness by what you have been conditioned to want and need by other people. How much of your music you listen to, the books you read, and the media you consume affect your desires. And more importantly, are those desires that would help you stay happy forever? The key takeaway here is, many of your desires are constructed by your environment. And so, learn how to differentiate between the desires that will bring you happiness for a long time and the desires that will leave you feeling unfulfilled. Many of these desires are like cotton candy, sweet and appealing, but melt away the moment you have it. So be careful. Now let's move on to number 3. What you just heard are snippets of drugs, video games, gambling, and cigarette lighting. What do all of these have in common? For the people who are involved in these activities, they induce a strong dopamine response to feel high and euphoric. The life on the hedonic treadmill. Hedonic meaning seeking pleasure and treadmill meaning going nowhere. Moments after the activity stops, though, they feel a little down, less motivated to do work or get a job, and more likely to be called a bum by their ex-wife. For those people, it is harder to discipline their urges, and they are slowly but surely snatched into the world of addiction. Dopamine is related to happiness, motivation, and addiction, but most likely not in the way you thought. You see, dopamine is released in any activity that would make you happy. Meth and exercise. Or exercise, you cheeky adrenaline junkies. Both of them release dopamine in the brain. But their effects are different. You see, the activities that would generally cause a very large spike in dopamine causes your baseline level of dopamine to stay below your natural baseline levels. In a now famous experiment, 2 groups of rats were used to examine the impact of dopamine on motivation. The control group had normal dopamine levels, whereas the other group had depleted levels. Both groups were given access to a lever that gave out food. Think of it like a bell you ring and suddenly a burger arrives at your kitchen table. The control group pushed the lever regularly and ate often, but didn't abuse the lever to overeat. But the dopamine depleted group, you would have thought pushed the lever so much and ate a lot. But no. Those mice were not motivated enough to even press the lever, and only ate when food was physically handed to them, and still had trouble inhibiting how much they ate. Their dopamine levels were so low that they did not find the motivation to push a lever even if it were for food. I know, bet this made you feel better about yourself when you were too lazy to cook food and ordered takeout instead. Don't worry, we've all done it. But what can we learn from this? The scientific interpretation is that although smoking and running can result in increases in dopamine and both make you happy, the struggle leading to achieving a goal is what modulates dopamine release. Meaning that if you eat lots of sugary foods one night and feel super happy, the lack of struggle associated with getting the sugary foods and the sheer amount of sugar introduced to your body will destroy your brain's dopamine balance and thus your sense of motivation. To add insult to injury, the next time you have sugary foods, you will want more to release the same amount of dopamine. To those listening to this realizing, oh crap, I'm addicted to insert thing I consume an unhealthy amount of here, that is why I feel so crappy all the time. Maybe I procrastinate too much, I feel my head is foggy, I have a problem focusing on things, and I lack discipline and motivation. I sympathize. Because just like you, I see it everywhere and have been a victim of this passive lifestyle as well. But there is good news. Well, bittersweet news. There's a way for you to use this system to your advantage. A way for you to turn things around if you are in a dark, ubiquitous pit. And in case you wanted proof, your brain is a masochist. Dopamine levels are affected in an opposite way for challenging activities. As in, if you choose to undertake a challenging activity, say an ice plunge or working out for an hour or some productive session at work, your dopamine levels remain high after the activity ends. Notice that this is completely senseless. Your body's like, oh, you want to feel good? Yeah, mate, just throw me in an ice bath and suffer for a good 3 minutes. But your body isn't just trying to be a... But if you think about it, I mean, really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Your body and mind deteriorates in a sedentary lifestyle. If it doesn't work out and stay healthy or develop itself to be fitter and more attractive, and you don't work hard in your career, you're bound to be lonely, weak, and sad. So your body keeping you happy after working hard is a form of tough love, you know? Avoiding the situation where every minor inconvenience might feel like you got hit by a train. So, simply put, the hustle, the mindful and purposeful strain on your body and mind is what you need to be happy and motivated more often. The interesting part, many major religions and schools of thought seem to agree everywhere in the world. We already talked about how Aristotle agrees with this notion, philosophically. But what if I told you Muslims have understood that God has created them in a term called kabd, as cited by the Holy Quran, meaning that humans were created in struggle and strife. The Buddha acknowledges struggle in life as a requirement to rise above a condition to obtain enlightenment. One of the reasons baptism is considered rebirth in Christianity is the struggle associated with basically needing to gasp for air while still being submerged underwater. This is a symbolic rebirth through struggle, as in you are not the person you were pre-baptism, as you are post-baptism. It seems universally people have understood the utility of purposefully putting yourself through challenges. You might think working your butt off every day never gave you anything. Well, that's because it isn't quite as straightforward as struggle means happiness. You see, perception has massive implications on your physiological state and your body's reactions. And one of the most remarkable is your attitude towards struggle and choosing to endure and matter for a purpose. And this is where your body tends to reward you and your courage by keeping dopamine high and increasing motivation. This is seen in your physiological reactions to stress if you embrace the stress as a motivation to act rather than an ailment to run away from. In a Harvard study where they taught their participants that their stress responses were to prepare them for strenuous work, and were taught that the heightened sense of awareness associated with anxiety prepares them to be attentive to their challenges, and their bodies reacted differently as a result of their perception. You see, commonly most stressed people would have their blood vessels constrict, resulting in higher blood pressure and increased risk of heart disease and stroke during stressful times. But for the group of participants that were conditioned to think of stress as a tool, their blood vessels remained dilated and felt less jitters, and their body's response didn't increase their chances of stroke or heart disease as a result. Key takeaway here is that dopamine is a motivation molecule, not just a happiness molecule. Simply put, the problem is that pleasure experienced without prior requirement for pursuit is terrible for us. And for us to feel happy in the long term, we must momentarily hustle for things that are hard to achieve in life. So, now we've conceptually talked about happiness for some time, but in case you wanted to hack your way into living a happier life, what will shock you is that according to science, there are some simple ways most of us can increase our chances about being satisfied and happier in life in general. Adapted from 2 TED Talks about happiness linked below, Amit, Sood, and the second, Dr. Rick Hansen, illustrates a simple trick. Live life mindfully. If you remember as a kid, all you wanted to do was think of all the ways the situation around you can be turned into something fun. I mean, what makes babies so cute, other than their baby fat rolls that make you want to pinch them into oblivion, is that they live life in the moment. No other worries. According to science, maybe you should give that a shot too. I don't mean pinching random adults into oblivion, I mean stopping and smelling the roses for once. Take a moment to focus on what is happening around you when you're experiencing something. All the sounds, the colors, the pleasure of being where you are. This has proven to increase your appreciation of any moment and increase your chances of being happier with that state you are in. It even improves the memory you have of the situation. A lot of us are so in our heads, it is difficult to realize when it's a beautiful day outside. Just looking out and thinking, wow, it's a beautiful day outside, can do wonders to your mood. Another hack is to do what my anime-loving or Japanese-speaking fans call Shinrin-yoku, basically meaning forest bathing. Take a walk in nature outside as soon as you wake up, or if more convenient, during your lunch break. Go out and walk around and surround yourself with nature. And as I mentioned, take some time to take it all in and enjoy your time being in the wilderness. If there's no forest, then a park with some trees would be just fine. The point is to find some nature and be a part of nature. As you may have heard from a famous experiment also by Harvard, those who live longest have the best social structures around, more so than eating healthy, exercising, or any of the other stuff we talked about today. We are social animals more than you believe, and having a good group of friends and a healthy family dynamic will be the medicine to your hardest of times and your most difficult ailments. And finally, eating less sugar, and I don't just mean candy, but even switching out some processed sugar for some organic honey can help avoid your mood and energy crashing like a train in Ohio. Yeah, it wasn't my proudest joke either. Anyway, struggle isn't the only way you can stay happy. Doing these simple things regularly, along with surrounding yourself with great people, can truly make happiness much more attainable, more so than anything money can buy. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed telling it. I hope this will at least remind you of the blessing that is family and friends, and the opportunity to enjoy the little beautiful things this world has to offer, and how they are quite literally the reason you smile. This was the Glass Prism podcast. Thank you all for listening. Please share us if you enjoyed this episode. We love you. Goodbye.